Good morning, Janice. I'm very glad that you could join me for these election conversations. So I have 5 questions for you and then some fun ones at the end. So the first question I have for you is, how will your party address the climate crisis?
Yeah, this is probably the most important crisis we have right now. COVID-19, the lockdown, this is kind of like a microcosm for the changes our society is going to have to make to deal with the climate crisis, just so we can have a planet with human life on it, going forward. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP did push the Liberal minority government to a net zero emission by 2050, but we have to do more right now to get there. We would reduce Canada's emissions by at least 50% by 2030. And we need to reach further where we can, because we're one of the privileged nations. We're industrialized, and this is a global issue. So we all have to work together to try and make this possible. This is the decade that counts. If we don't start reversing the climate change right now, it's going to just be way too late. So we need to start with putting a price on carbon. Large corporations should not be able to use our children's future without paying for it. We'll institute mandatory transparency on the carbon footprint and risk for publicly traded companies. So they have to declare this and make sure that our finance systems aren't rewarding companies that are not with the program and helping to get us to net zero. We have to stop the $8 billion a year we're spending to subsidize oil and gas exploration, refinery, and transport. This is just not possible anymore. It's not okay to have one more pipeline. It's over. We need clean, renewable energies, and they have to be local, and they have to create good jobs for the people that are transitioning, from a carbon economy into the new economy. And that's what I like most about Jagmeet Singh's platform on climate change, is that it puts people first, because we can't just expect people who work in jobs that are highly dependent on carbon to just give up their incomes, right, and move along. We have to plan, we have to create a fair and just transition of the entire economy to a low carbon economy. And then lastly, we can't just look at climate change. I know that's the trendy issue right now, but we need to remember that the ocean is absorbing most of the carbon that we are making. So overfishing, too much plastics in the water, all of those kind of things need to go hand in hand with reducing emissions. So the NDP platform will look at that as well. We need to keep our old growth forests because it's all connected. So.
Very good.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much for that response, Janice. Next question. What will your party do to assist the vulnerable in our society?
I think the first thing which has been tried and works is a guaranteed livable income, for seniors, people with disabilities, everyone who's vulnerable in our community. It's not good enough to just provide shelter and basic food. People need to be able to participate in the economy so that they're buying in stores, right? And small businesses can thrive. Like we've seen that under COVID. COVID didn't hit us as hard because there was sort of that guaranteed CERB income for people who had lost their jobs, people who were hardest hit, especially young people in our community. And that keeps businesses going. So we need a guaranteed minimum income. We also have we need a public health system that does more than just basic physical health. We need to include a Medicare, so medications that are way too expensive for everyone to afford. Dental care is very important. Psychological health. So we need to, if we're going to help if we're going to make a difference, we have to have free access to psychological health services for everyone in our community. We need $10 a day childcare. You know, that's something that has been tried in Quebec. It worked. It got more people off the system, off of government aid, and into the workforce. And we shouldn't have a situation where people can't afford to go to work. And again, we've seen that in COVID. I mean, COVID has been a really good teacher. We've seen that the people who had to stay home because the schools were shut down were the women in many cases. So a lot of women have had to leave the workforce, and this affects business, this affects the economy, and it brings everyone down. You know, for economy to grow, you need people who can spend and you need people who can work. We need affordable housing. I mean, that's a huge thing in Richmond Hill. Young people are moving away, right? Because they can't afford to live in the same neighborhood as their kids, or they're still living with their parents, right? And it's, I mean, we've seen that really bad. The house next door to me, like 3 times, between the family that lived there, that kids were same age as my kids, we hung out. When they moved back to Montreal, like 3 or 4 times someone bought that house, renovated it, and sold it for more, right? Like nobody lived there for over 10 years. It just kept going up in price until the family that now has a child that moved in finally. We have to stop that. And the NDP wants to have some controls over that, especially, you know, there's a lot of foreign ownership where people are being rent gouged, you know, and absentee landlords, you know, not taking care of the properties. And, you know, this is not, I mean, housing should be a right and a basic living need, not an investment. There are lots of things where rich people can invest. But then we also need to protect pensions from bankruptcy. So we are going to put into a law where if a company goes bankrupt, the people that worked there for 30 years and paid into the pension don't lose their pension first. That's just wrong. And then also a senior strategy to try and help bring seniors out of poverty.
Very good. Thank you for that detailed answer, Janice. Third question. How will your party address the issue of the very rich not paying their fair share of taxes?
I think the growing gap, I first heard that term about 20 years ago, and it is just, you know, it has gotten way out of control. And again, COVID's a really good example where like this huge crisis hits us economically, and the poor all lose their jobs. And our richest, the billionaires at the top, are making 78 billion more now than they were back down during the COVID. So some people are reaping profits because things don't hit everybody the same way. So the first thing we want to do is a temporary tax for all the corporations that actually profited off of this emergency. So all the COVID profiteers, you know, let's take some of that money back to help build you know, the resurgence of our economy, hopefully after that. We also want to go after companies that took subsidies for their workers, but then paid huge bonuses and dividends to their shareholders. We need to increase the capital gains inclusion rate to 75%. These are on the NDP's platform, boosting the marginal tax rate for the top by 2%, and create a luxury goods tax for things like yachts. I mean, the number of yachts that have been sold since the pandemic, I'm sorry, I can't remember the number, but it was atrocious, right? And these, you know, we need to keep things fair because, you know, I don't want to be thanked by the head of Amazon for paying for the rocket that sent him to Mars or wherever he went, you know, farther than we'll ever go. And it's not reasonable for some to make that much money. So we need to tax those luxury items. We also want to roll back those constant corporate tax breaks that we saw with successive conservative governments, at least by 3% to 2010 levels right now, and make sure that everyone's paying tax, like a lot of internet companies, Facebook, Google, you know, there's all kinds of breaks preventing them from paying their fair taxes. So. Okay.
My phone rang when it shouldn't, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, our first question. How would you like to see Indigenous peoples represented in our society moving forward?
I think the primary thing that we have had to learn is that Indigenous people need to represent themselves. We've seen what happens when colonizers try to do what they think is best for others that they don't understand. I mean, we're talking about multiple cultures here, multiple languages, many different living situations. And they don't need white people telling them what's for their own good, right? That's what happened with the residential school systems. I was born in the early 60s, and I remember watching as a child on TV social workers and police pulling children away from their parents, to fly them away, and being told as a child, when I'm like, what's happening, right? And I'm told it's for their own good. And we knew about it, right? We were taught in elementary school about blankets and smallpox. But it took actually seeing the bodies, like finding the bodies, for this to become a political issue on an election agenda. I mean, we rarely hear about Indigenous issues. So I think we need to do the full investigation. We need to totally bring justice. We need to find out everything and show it so that there's no doubt of what happened. It was genocide. We are responsible, and we need to take responsibility. And we can't really partner with Indigenous people to represent them until we take that responsibility and we participate in reconciliation. And reconciliation, just like climate change, is not, okay, we'll be good now. Everything's better. Let's move on, right? Get over it. Like, that's not how it works. People need time. We destroyed generations of parents where we took kids away and didn't teach them how to be parents to the next generation, and then took their kids away, and so on. And so it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of resources and support. And we have all the things we need to do. We have all these recommendations piled up in our hallways like we're hoarders or something, and we need to start implementing what we've already been told to do, like, the truth and reconciliation calls to action, like, Jordan's principles that no matter where you live on an Indigenous reserve, you should still have for a child all the services that a Toronto or Richmond Hill child would normally get. So we need to demonstrate that we're listening and not just perform, and be contrite. We have to show to the Indigenous people who have no reason to trust us that our words mean something now. And then maybe we can start moving ahead. We want to see and ensure that all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders have a seat at the highest tables, for action on environmental and climate change, as well as on, their local healthcare, their energy products, justice. We need to do healing through the justice system. If you ever watch a Johnny Cash concert in a prison in Canada, and you see that the entire population is Indigenous people inside that prison. We need to get more people out of prison, restorative justice for Indigenous people, and start healing. It took us hundreds and hundreds of years to destroy. So.
Very good. Thank you, Janice. A fifth question. It's your time to brag.
All right.
What abilities do you have to be a member of Parliament?
Well, I have been a politician in the union environment for 30 years. So I have 30 years experience representing very diverse group of people, from underwater welders to secretaries to highly educated technologists. So I know how to listen. I know how to understand what someone's issues are and to creatively problem solve. Like, how can we work within the framework that we have with the partners we have, the employer, the government. I work for a community college, so a lot of it's the government. And how can we find solutions to real people's problems? So I've been doing that for a long time, and I keep getting elected by my coworkers. I represent 2,500 people, 1,200 now during COVID at Seneca, but I also chair the division for all the support staff in Ontario, all the 24 colleges. So I understand the need for bilingualism. I understand the need for listening to Indigenous voices because, we work with equity groups and those are my strengths. Courageous, creative problem solver. So the second reason is that I understand that if you get elected, it's not to be a dictator, right? The role of an MP, I understand it. Same with my role as a president of a union, is to facilitate democracy, not to make the decisions, but to make sure your constituents understand the issues, understand the alternative solutions, and to try and build consensus and listen to the voices and allow people to have their say through you. And sometimes you have polarizing issues. I'm not a polarizing person. You can't be when you work with real human beings. So it's about finding solutions that everyone can live with so we can move forward. And finally, I'm just a very hard worker. So I work hard for the environment when I'm not doing my work. We're out trying to restore wetlands in York Region, bringing back Indigenous plants. I went back to school to study environmental studies at York University to learn more about climate change policy and social change, because we do have to change a lot about how we live. And I really want to put those practices into real life. And, I went back to school full time while I worked full time, and I raised 3 children. So I know how to work and I know how to manage. I won't say manage time. You cannot manage time, but I know how to serve time and get a lot done. So I think I would be an excellent member of Parliament for Aurora, Oak Ridges, and Richmond Hill.
Thank you for that. Okay, so
right.
We're going to switch gears. I've got 8 fun and fast questions. We're going to say it with a smile on our face.
All right.
First, what's your favorite color?
Ugly green.
Ugly green. Your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Mint chocolate chip, I think.
Have you ever driven a motorcycle?
No, my mom worked in a merge and we weren't allowed. So.
Ooh, okay. Do you ever wear socks that don't match?
Not really. No.
Nope. Okay. What's your favorite genre of music?
I love all music. I can't pick. Sorry.
Okay.
Jazz, rock, punk, everything, newest stuff. So.
Very good. What type of car do you drive?
A Saturn Ion, but mostly I ride the bus, just not so much under COVID.
Yes. Okay. What, if any, musical instruments can you play?
I play the piano and I sing in a choir. So.
Okay, very nice. And do you chew gum?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you, Janice. This has been enjoyable. Good luck with the campaign.
Thank you very much for your time.